Good morning. As always, I'm just going to wait for an indication that we're all hearing ourselves, even though I believe I should by now be comfortable in the knowledge that you can hear me loud and clear. But you must remember that I evolved the week that was to help me settle into a rhythm before I go into the subject for the day. And by the way, that's mango leaf tea. I recommend it to all of you. So, good morning. All right, Ucheomo, I see you. Crypt, Yomi. All right, thank you, everyone. That's sound check done. There is a lot to unpack this week, but I think um, there's something that has clouded me all through the week that was. It still sits heavy on my shoulder, even this morning, and it is the killing of the math teacher in Orire local government. The video is everywhere you look online, but I have a filter on my social media feed. So it filters out the worst of it. And I have been very deliberate about avoiding watching the video, even though I've seen enough stills, pictures to have clarity as to exactly what happened. And I noticed that we have become increasingly desensitized to the death happening all around us to the point where we've even evolved a we've evolved a new language almost in recognition of the devaluation of our lives. So when Nigerians want to talk about somebody being killed, something that has become routine, it was as if that somehow erases the fact that is another human being that was just killed, just another Nigerian like us. So some sort of gallow humor, some morbid acceptance of the inevitability, or is it the commonality of violent death. We, instead of saying somebody was murdered, killed, because of the commonalities of these things, we've evolved a word that is uniquely Nigerian. It was pride. That is more or less an euphemism for the acceptance of the devaluation of our lives. We evolved languages to explain madness and normalize it. You know, I told you every time I would speak about the week that was, it would only be so that we might use the event as a window into what has become of us as a people. So Nigerians are no longer killed. Other people are killed. We are now pied. Whether it's the police that did the killing or their uniformed counterparts, the bandits or the terrorists or whatever we choose to call the many non-state actors who have overtaken the Nigerian space, the Nigerian has been pied. It's shocking and it's scary. And the man was killed. Just like a whole lot of other Nigerians were killed in that week. Some would have been killed by policemen who probably didn't get filmed, as it happened with our brother in Delta. Nigerian is getting tired. We're no longer killed. We've come to accept the devaluation of our lives and we are evolving language to accept this devaluation. So Mr. Adebayo was quiet. May God rest his soul. May God console his family. We'll move on to another tragedy before the end of the week, that is, and we'll probably forget all about Mr. Adebayo and his killing. We've seen this too many times. A brigadier general was equally pied. He wasn't killed, he was pied on his base that was overrun. That's the country that we have become. How many policemen do I talk about? Rim. I shouldn't forget the policeman that threatened to kill us if we record them. He was foolish enough to record himself, probably intoxicated, but he was speaking the mind of 1,001 other policemen. But that's another issue. It's not for now. And then in that week that was, we had a small victory that we should at least celebrate. Even though the process of winning that victory also says a lot about the state of play in the quest or the journey towards the Nigerian revolution. This freedom of justice crack. What we did to ourselves to delay his freedom, how people have found justifications everywhere they turn for one side or the other, the complete absence of an adherence to the truth as the guiding principle at all times. If that would happen with Justice Crack, how many more all around the country away from the limelight have had Nigeria happen to them in multiple fashion? When these things happen, I'll continue to because I need us to be very clear about something. There are enough things to lament about in the country that we are living in, that we have built. And this cannot be a gathering of people who lament. But it is critical that we look into events that has happened just in the week that was, so that we use it as a window into what is happening on multiple levels across our country. So look at the Justice Crack situation and extrapolate. That is the normalcy. That is the normal. That is what is happening everywhere you turn. In the week that was, it was rather interesting to watch the politicization of terror, especially the one in Oyo State. I watched as intelligent human beings completely forgot that it is the role of the federal government in the draconian evil constitution imposed on Nigeria by Decree 24. It is essentially the duty of the federal government, who controls each and every one of the security apparatus of the state. It is the duty of that state to do the things for which it is largely criticizing Sheyi Makinde. That is without prejudice to the fact that as the governor of the state, he has his own role to play, and his explanation on the aircraft thing beggars a little belief. But at the end of the day, as the national security advisor lost the phone numbers of the terrorists, as we were told that he had them by Bayo Ononuga, when did they stop phoning terrorists? And since when did the governor become part of the phoning network? It bears repetition. I spoke to this some time back when I spoke of the Amotekun force that was set up thanks to Arakunrin, who is now late, uh, Akeredolu. I remember that the corps commander, General Togun, came out and said that in seeking to train Amotekun, he was constrained from carrying out certain levels of training, and they were denied automatic weapons. So the capacity of those who were meant to be defending Oyo State, as well as other southwestern states, were curtailed by the deliberate actions of the federal government. So how is it that the same federal government, and in this time, the National Security Advisor has come out to say that he harmed a Fulani militia in Kwara State, and it is now the duty of Makinde, a state governor who does not have the capacity to import the necessary arms, whose militia could not even be trained in the use of certain things because Togun is on record. He came out to say it. They denied him the right to train the Amotekun force in Oyo State. They denied him the right. They equally denied them weapons. These are the same weapons that have been handed to Fulani militia by the National Security Advisor. It is a known fact that before the Fulani would invade any place, the first thing that usually tended to happen was the disarming of the local capacity to repel attacks. How is this any different? So please stop the politics and stop. Makinde would have his own issue. Blame him for the things that he has done. Maybe he needs to account better for what he did with the money budgeted for the aircraft. Yeah, go ahead, deal with that. But do not shift the duty. The buck stops on the president's table. And the president in this case, whether anyone likes it or not, I don't like it. It's Bola Ahmed Tinubu. So the duty of securing the territorial boundaries of Nigeria falls squarely on him. And you guys should stop with the politics of if he cannot deal with securing Oyo State, is it Nigeria he wants to deal with? He should go and drop his presidential ambition. I care nothing for his presidential ambition, but let's be very clear. The one that has been sat there for over 3 years has shown us clearly that he's manifestly incapable of protecting Nigeria. So please do not insult us by continuing that political attack. Forget about it. So, whilst we're about it, in the last week, Amukwiton remains the chairman of INEC. I just say I should remind all of you. He's the one that is meant to be presiding over what is meant to be the coming election. And he's a partisan. He's an APC man, openly partisan, but he's the one that will be conducting your coming elections. I just said to inform you. Have you noticed how they are counting? Have you noticed? 100, 900, magical counting are happening in the APC primaries. They have opened a window to show you what they are planning for 2027. I just said I should keep you updated so that you don't forget about it. And then, in the midst of all of this, they've rolled out multiple distractions for you. So instead, during the week when terrorists finally infiltrated and came into open space in the southwest, in the same week, the trending issues in Nigeria had nothing to do with the sickening realities of Nigeria. You guys would rather talk about Frank's wife, Frank himself, or you talk about the singer. Exactly what does that do to erase your sickening reality? Yorùbás will say, kíni dùnnú ẹlẹ́wọ̀n tó ń fago sọ́wọ́, ṣẹ̀kẹ̀ṣẹ̀kẹ̀ lọ́tún, ṣẹ̀kẹ̀ṣẹ̀kẹ̀ lósì, ó wá fò sókè ó lé ní àrò. What is it that is actually accelerating the prisoner that is strapping on a wristwatch? Then he jumps up and down. He says, today is going to be bad. What day is not bad for him? That's the reality of the Nigerian. But instead of us to focus on what is important, we allow ourselves to be distracted by nonsense. One musician is being that musician, that one is, and that is what engages our attention. Farcical gyrations up and down the place. I'll finish by talking about Brother Desmond. That opens a window for you to understand the power dynamics in Nigeria. The man couldn't make up his mind whether he wanted to fight or flee. That's the same thing you are seeing with Fubara. They derive their powers from you. Their powers are derived from their godfathers. So they must always kowtow to their godfathers. But that's all on you and on me. We are not the employers of those who ruin Nigeria. They are their own employers. They are beholden to themselves, not to me and you. Enough said on the week that was. Good morning, everybody. It's 10 o'clock now. And I do have a serious subject to unpack. I was very sure last week that I was going to be speaking to you on the subject we are more than them. I proudly announced it to all of you during the course of that week. No, during the course of my lecture last Sunday. But then the terrorists got my attention. Even though I've refused to watch the video, I've seen enough stills and pictures of what happened to the maths teacher. It is typical of what is happening to the Nigerian on a daily basis in different facets in multiple areas of our existence. It illustrated the desperation of the situation for me, and I would explain myself. The Americans recently released a country survey of Nigeria, and that survey showed that it is only in the southwest that you have relative, even though those of us who live in the southwest have for some time been extremely paranoid about where we travel to, even within the southwest. I have farms, or maybe I should say I had farms around Ijebu, where you beyond the Akpoje farm settlement. Some of my farms borders J4. I had a couple of cocoa farms there. I gave up my farms almost 10 years ago because of Fulani incursion into the forests of that neighborhood and the resultant criminality that followed in their wake. So I gave up my farm because it became too dangerous, along with some other issues. But the key thing was the insecurity. It used to be that I would drive from Apoje after Oshun, and I would link Ikirun to bust out on Ife Ibadan Expressway. Scenic, beautiful environment. I used to drive there since over 20 years ago. I used to connect through the farm roads to come up. Anyway, long story cut short, the insecurity became so endemic that I gave it up. And having given it up and walking away from the years of investment in that place, I have known for some time that our forests have become infiltrated. And by the time Obadiah was giving his testimony before he died, and he spoke about the likelihood of an invasion, an all-out invasion that was delayed by the COVID thing, it became clearer to me again that it was just a matter of time. So when the Orire local government incident happened, I was not particularly surprised, but it did bring home to me the extent of alarm that should be sounding. And in that moment, the more I looked at our situation, the more it became analogous to the narrative that you will find in 2 Kings chapter 7, verse 3. And it spoke, and I'm not, because this is not your church, but there is biblical reference, and if you have time, you can sit down and read it in your own time. But what the leper story was explaining was that there were these lepers at the gate of Samaria, and the city itself was besieged by the Syrians. And these lepers could not enter into the city because obviously, traditionally, they are meant to sit at the city gate because leprosy, of course, highly infectious, contagious. Nobody wanted anything to do with it. So the leper will usually be at the city gate, where it will be completely dependent on harms and the benevolence of the city. But in this case, the city was besieged, the gates were locked, and they were outside. And in their desperation, they said to themselves, if we stay in this place, we perish. Go and read it yourself. But the important thing is that they had choices to make. They were either going to starve at the city gate, or they were going to have to enter into the city if they were allowed, which would be a taboo. Nobody would have anything to do with them. And a besieged city was not likely to be one that was happy to hand out arms to persons they would have ordinarily shot out of the city. So they decided, if we stay here, we die. Why don't we go to the Syrians? Perhaps the Syrians will be kind to us. And this is where the Nigerian finds himself, represented with the lepers. The reality of the Nigerian is that we have become as the lepers. The desperation suggests that if we do something about the situation in which we find ourselves, which is completely hopeless and desperate, we can actually drive change or breakthrough entirely on the back of our desperation. Because in reality, what exactly are the alternatives? Every day we sit down and we say the Nigerian is a coward. He's not ready for a change. He does not want a revolution. A revolution being a change in our circumstances, a turnaround from the current trajectory of our country. It is very easy, and when you look at it, you now have to ask yourself, a person that is said to be a coward gets up, sells his family's substance, takes the journey by road to Kano, from Kano to Niamey, Niamey to Tripoli, Tripoli across the Mediterranean. Thousands have perished. They know the risk. Young ladies are traveling that Sahara. They purchase condoms in the knowledge that they will be raped on the journey, but in the vain hope that their rapers or rapists will be kind enough to wear condoms. They carry condoms on the journey. I've read personal accounts. I've watched documentaries readily available on CNN. If you would watch on YouTube, accounts of those who have traveled these routes, and yet you call them cowards. There is something critical about the lepers, and that critical thing is what differentiates the lepers who acted in their desperation from the Nigerians who have acted in their desperation. And we will come to that. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I need you to note it so that you will not forget and you would understand the importance. The lepers, all four of them, they acted as one. They understood the commonality of their affliction. They recognized that regardless of whether they were Christian or Muslim or Yoruba or Hausa or Igbo leper, they understood they were all lepers. They recognized the commonality of their suffering, and they recognized the need to find common purpose. So they acted as one. Nigerian lepers are usually busy dividing themselves. Even when they act desperately, they are acting sometimes never in concert, and almost as though they are enemies, even when their challenges are identical. So the Nigerian that is busy jackpine, his parallels are the same. He's looking at stagnation. So the hopelessness of his economic and social realities informs his decision to run. So some run. That's the gate, the critical point of decision, the challenge. The gate is already shut against you. The city speaks to the broken social environment, the complete lack of inclusion, the insecurity in Nigeria, the totality of the way everything appears to be upside down. Why is our situation the way it is? It tracks back to the failure of the lepers to recognize that they are lepers. All lepers acting devoid of cooperation, fighting as though they are not meant to be on the same team, in the same army. Look, Nigerians have in front of us the choice of the lepers. We can sit at the gate where we are, and which is where we currently are, excluded from the 1% or less who are occupying the city, whilst the majority of us have become as lepers, locked out at the gate. Or we may decide on our own. On our own, we may decide to act as one and enter the camp of the Syrian. And what is the camp of the Syrian? The camp of the Syrian is the place of abundance that comes from mutuality of action and acting as one in pursuit of common purpose. That is where abundance lies for all of us. Not in this individualistic pursuit of narrow interests that serves zero purpose. We chase titillations instead of looking to do the needful, which is to envision the future, which is the camp of the Syrian. Everything that we desire is at the other side of our fears. And it is something year-old man sits in Aso Rock. A Desmond idiot said he came back into the country and they gave him a document and he signed because he thought it was from the presidency. Window into how Nigeria works. This guy, 50 something, he would have been an elder statesman at his age when then go on and Obasanjo were in power. But at 50 something, they gave him a document and he signed it. And this was the excuse he brought into the public space to explain his estrangement from his godfather. The city gate. The city gate. The gate of exclusion. That gate of exclusion does not just exclude Desmond. It discounts me and you. And as long as we remain at that gate, the system is happy with our decision to sit at that gate. Last week, I was going to talk to you, and I said it at the time that we'll be speaking on the fact that we are more than them. But I think we've come to the point where we should actually be setting the basis for action. And in order to do this, because if you remember, the lepers' choice was to either remain there or move forward, moving forward into the camp of the Syrians. If anything must change, it will be because we moved. If we fail to move, nothing will change. And if we don't take responsibility for our own lives, if we allow prayer merchants to tell us to pray Nigeria to change, nothing will change. If anything is going to change, it will be because we moved. We're done talking. The time to move is nigh. But if we are going to move, we must move behind a plan. And that is where I think this needs to go. Nigeria cannot continue the way it is. But if we sit down and we keep lamenting the obvious without a plan presented to you behind which you too may kill just like the lepers killed, because somebody started the idea, if we stay here, we die. If we move, the worst that will happen is we also die. So let's move. But they had clarity as to where they were moving to. And that is where I think we need to enter. Where are we moving to if we are refusing to stay where we are? Because where we are is no longer sustainable. Where we are is a place that guarantees only death. It is devoid of hope. It is the gate. We are excluded, and if we remain here, we will die. The reality is that Nigeria is fast becoming a killing field. Very few, if any, safe places remaining. The government has shown very little interest in fighting what we call insecurity, but which is necessarily a policy of governance in the Nigeria that has evolved. Because in the same country where the chief of army staff is telling me and you that the terrorists are our brother, the terrorists are busy slaughtering teachers, terrorizing primary school children. This is after they had for years kidnapped people within most villages and towns to the point where provincial cities and towns have become depopulated, and Lagos and other cities have become the centers of refugee settlement. And we've all conveniently forgotten about this. You see people riding Okadas in Lagos behaving like mad people. I assure you that the bulk of these persons are war refugees who have come into our towns. They've joined us at the gate. Without purpose, they will become part of the invading army. So we need to yoke ourselves to purpose. And in seeking to yoke ourselves to purpose, I have committed myself, as I have said multiple times, and I'm tired of talking about it, to constructing a platform for engagement. And in the absence of this, I have felt myself constrained because I am done talking. I'm tired of talking. I want to see whether you who have been listening are ready to move. But I don't want us to move without a plan. But I think we can begin these discussions. Today, not tomorrow, today, I will release as a standalone document. It's been there for years. It's right there on my website. The draft constitution for a new Nigeria. It's been there for at least 8 years. Available to all of you. You have not, a lot of you have downloaded it, but I'm asking you now, download it. Go to dailyfarotimi.com, download that document. It is a draft constitution that is proposing a new governance structure for Nigeria. It comes with recommendations for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It comes with recommendation for asset tracing and anti-corruption to take back what a lot of people have stolen from this country. There are multiple ideas. They've been contributed by persons, not just myself. We sat down, we drafted this. You may have ideas, note them. This podcast is going to evolve. I'm not sure if I'll be broadcasting next week because I need to have the proper infrastructure in place before coming back. I'm done talking. I am not a content creator. My job and my duty, my purpose is to have a revolution in Nigeria that is as peaceful as any revolution can be, because it is the product of weaponized brains who understand the challenges of their time and are careful about how they proceed. You can only do this based on ideas that you are prepared to sell to the people, so that the people themselves recognize what is in need for them when you are calling for change. I can't do that alone. Every week, about 8,000 plus of you watch this. If it is only you who are doing your own duty as I'm seeking to do mine, we'll be quantum leaps ahead of where we are. So even if I'm going to be coming on here from next week, which I doubt, it will be to start teaching from that draft constitution. It will be to explain that draft constitution to each and every one of us. So if I'm broadcasting next week, it will be me preaching from that document, seeking to explain it to each and every one of those who would care to listen, to understand. This draft constitution is only one leg of it. Where the platform that we are building becomes important is because it also presents the ideas that we seek to implement in the governance of the country, if we ever bring ourselves to act as one, as the lepers did, and bring about the Nigeria that we seek, which is the camp of the Syrians. If we do not move, nothing will move. If you do not use your brain, they will use your head. They've been using our heads in Nigeria for a long time, and a lot of heads have been used to carry pom-pom, carry load. They've even made sure that in seeking to devalue your life, they've recruited you as part of the army of those who are devaluing your own life. Please, I think the time has come when we, as the lepers, must find common purpose and understand that if anything must change, it will be because we moved. And as far as I can see, and as the wise man once said, it's better to fail trying than to fail to try. We must at least give it a shot. We must give it a shot. The lepers could have folded their hands or thrown up their hands in resignation to their fate, but they didn't do that. They found the grace to move. Yeah. They could have allowed themselves to become cynical about their circumstances and allowed themselves to become estranged from the process of saving themselves. But they didn't. The reality is that what religion has done to the Nigerian is to disconnect the people from the realization of the fact that divine intervention demands human movement. Instead of the merchants of hope in this hopeless land, the religious dealers, to reconnect the people to the reality of the need for personal responsibility in the quest for change. They tell them to pray. They tell them to fast. They tell them God has already chosen the leader. The message of hopelessness in the place where hope should be preached. But I said to you this morning, heaven helps those who help themselves. If you would dare to find common purpose as the lepers, the Syrian camp awaits on the other side. Do you understand? The Syrian camp wait on the other side. And whether we like it or not, we have to cross into that camp or we'll die at this gate. We could sit here and speak Dogon Turenchi from now till kingdom come. But the lesson I have learned from the lives of those who came before is that sometimes it might very well be that it is not to this generation that one is sent. Fela had his music to immortalize his message or messages. And you will find very quickly that there is a common thematic thread that runs through the entirety of Fela's work: the need for us to liberate ourselves. I, not out of any lack of modesty, maybe in recognition of the immortality offered by social media and the democratization of the media space, I do everything I do these days in the belief that even if it's not you guys, a generation would come, because it is in the nature of the human spirit to seek justice. A generation will come that will need to know how we got here and how they can get out. Maybe that's the generation to which this message will find resonance, or with which this message will find resonance. In this way, it is easier to find hope and keep going, doing what one is doing. I will say this: pay attention to the series of messages that we'll be having going forward, because this is the kernel of the struggle that must be had. I'll be laying out the vision for getting to the camp of the Syrians. Even the message I was planning to deliver this week, "We are more than them," is actually in recognition of the same message that I've ended up preaching today. Because in "We are more than them," my intention was to draw your own attention to the commonalities of our affliction, something I have spoken about multiple times. But I was hoping we could talk about that this week until that was overtaken by the lepers' choice. So we've talked about the lepers' choice this week. Next week, I intend, whatever else might come up or not come up, we need to have a roadmap to redemption. So may God spare all of our lives, however you worship Him. But next Sunday, I'll start a series teaching from that constitution. I'm sure before that is done, we would have the website ready to start registering members and to disseminate the change manifesto, which we're calling the social contract. We would have that available before, if I don't finish, but sometime in the immediate weeks, the bulk of the Technical work is done. It's actually the literature that we are putting together. But I'll start by teaching from the Constitution next week. Have you blessed week and do stay safe wherever you are. And remember, Amokwiton is still your INEC chairman, even as you are preparing for the coming election. Keep that at the back of your mind and stay safe. God bless.